Hello and welcome to this session where we'll be talking about deployment. What is deployment? Well, first let's look at a real life scenario. For example, we all work at a car dealership. We have 100 salespeople that are logging into Salesforce, tracking their records, and you're one of them. So you're in there looking at different objects within the system, which have triggers in the background and epics classes. You have your workflows, you have your reports, you have your dashboards. And I'm a developer. So as a developer, I go in and I change some of the code, some of the objects, some of the fields that are in there. And as you're entering information, it's breaking because suddenly that field is not there, or the functionality has just changed, or the trigger is not firing the way you expected it to fire. Not only that, but we have 100 other users that are having all of those system problems. What caused the problem? Primarily that I, as a developer, was working in the production environment that all the users are in. So in a production environment, what needs to happen is the developer works in a separate environment, quote unquote, the sandbox. And once they're done, that we ship our metadata, our changes, our code changes to the production environment. And that is what deployment is. So in real life, what happens is we would develop within a sandbox and then deploy it into another sandbox or a production environment, and that is the definition in short of deployment. In other words, deployment is the movement of our metadata from one organization to another. And the reason behind it is that we cannot develop epics in our Salesforce production environment. Live users accessing our system while we're developing, that would definitely destabilize our data and corrupt our application. There's a number of tools that we could use for deployment, such as Force.com, IDE, Force.com migration tool, change sets, and SOAP API. Now, depending on the version that you have, so for example, if we have the developer edition, we cannot use change sets or other tools, but we would need Salesforce Enterprise or other paid editions. Hence, we will be elaborating some of those different scenarios, and we're going to start with the Force.com ID deployment method in the next stage. So what are the steps if I'd like to deploy using the Force.com Eclipse IDE integrated development environment? A couple of steps. Step number one, let's open Eclipse and open the class trigger that needs to be deployed. And then step two, once we click on the deploy to server, then we would need to enter our username and password of the organization wherein the component needs to be deployed. By performing those two steps, our Apex components will be deployed to the target organization. Deploying using change sets. We can deploy validation rules, workflow rules, Apex classes, and triggers from one organization to the other by connecting them via the deployment settings. In this case, our organizations must be connected. To open the deployment setup, you would need to follow the following steps. Please remember that this is not available in the developer edition. And they are: step number one, we'd go to the setup and search for deploy. Step two, click on outbound change set in order to create change set to deploy. Step three, add components to change set using the add button and then save and click on upload. And then step four, go to the target organization and click on the inbound change set and finally click on deploy. SOAP API calls to deploy. This method is not commonly used. However, we can deploy our metadata by using any of the following three methods. We can call the compile and test, compile classes, and compile triggers. Force.com migration tool. This tool is used for scripted deployment. We have to first download the Force.com migration tool, and then we can perform the file-based deployment, or we can do the scripted deployment.